Okay, Jason, first of all, thank you so much for coming to the Mobility Monday and sharing that information with us. This brings in different groups of people, different interests with the database. And so we talk about it, but we probably need your expertise in developing it and in sharing the information with us. So thank you so much. So why don't you give yourself a brief introduction and we can start.
Terrific. First, let me thank you all for inviting me to present in, I guess, two housekeeping rules. One is I was sharing before we started to record. I just asked for everyone's indulgence. I'm not the greatest Zoom user for screen sharing, so it might be a little bit back and forth to get the information on the screen that we want and for you all to see that. And second, I know I've presented before, but I did want to spend a little bit of time just going over the big data project for both reports, 65 plus national and for working age adults. And I'll talk briefly about that. I'll support everything that I'm saying from what's on the screen here. And since there's so few of us, Eileen, let's just sort of engage in conversation around it. Ask me questions. The other two folks who are here, Faith and Stephanie, just feel free to jump on and ask conversations. There'll be 5 of us, so we can do this in a really, a conversational discussion format. I think that would probably work better just given the smallness of the group, although I recognize that many people will watch it via recording. Having said all that, let me give you an introduction and be more formal. I'm Jason Eckert. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for VisionServeAlliance. For those who do not know, VisionServeAlliance is the not-for-profit membership organization that agencies across the United States and 2 in Canada who provide services for people who are living with blindness and low vision, who provide services to those folks. We're the agency that they belong to. So we are their collective voice. We do some advocacy work around that. We provide them with membership benefits. We do a whole host of things for the members at all different levels, like educational webinars. We host conferences. There are some specific affinity groups for chief executive officers of the organizations and other professionals within the organization. We have a lot of interaction with national organizations like AER and ACVREP and American Council for the Blind, just to cite a few. We have a double sort of bottom line. Our first bottom line is that we always ask, how is the work that we're doing at VSA positively affecting the lives of persons who are living with blindness and low vision, right? And then the second bottom line there is we're not doing that directly. We're doing that through our agency members. So how are we interacting with our agencies to keep them strong, growing, healthy, involved, supported, so they can go ahead and put the work out there, the direct service work. And when I think of that, I think of, organizations like this, where there, of course, is the direct service work that's happening with all of you who are working at agencies. And although we don't represent schools, we do have some schools that are members. And it's for the same purpose, that the work that gets done within the schools is still serving folks who are living with blindness and vision loss, just at a younger age. Schools can be members, and we try to keep them healthy and supported, but it's harder for them, and they have some other organizations as well. And that's just because of their structure. They're not private institutions that pay, that can participate in like membership fees and things like that. Some can and do, and we really support them as well. Okay. So having said all of that, for those who know or don't know, that's me, that's VisionServeAlliance. One thing that came out of VisionServeAlliance, several years ago in one of our national coalitions, what we call the AVLNC, it's the Aging and Vision Loss National Coalition, was that there wasn't good data on who really is blind and vision impaired or living with low vision across the country. We just didn't have good data on that. And so we sought to create some good data on that nationally, state-wise, and on the granular level as we could, meaning county by county. So we launched a project that we call the Big Data Project to bring in a whole host of information of who is blind and vision impaired across the country. So let me start there and talk a little bit about your what's on your screen, I guess. But before I do, Eileen or anyone else, any question about that sort of introduction, who we are and what this is? These are the results from that project that we launched to sort of understand how many people are across the country living with blindness and vision loss.
And this is related to adults? Or
Yes, all adults. This report is the adults for 65 plus is what should be on the screen. It should say that at the top. I hope it does.
Right, it does. Yes.
Great. But the great question, Eileen, and there are two reports that we're going to go over: 65 and older, which we call the 65 plus report, or working age adults, which will be 18 to 64. Now, nuance on top of nuance when you do social science data. There is obviously people who are over 65 who are working, right? So I understand, and that creates a little cross-referencing. But for the most part, we captured the 65 and older by age, not by working status. We didn't pay that much attention to working. But when we got to 18 to 64, we really paid attention to working. And I'll talk a little bit about those differences.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Any other questions? There are none.
Okay. So I'm going to try to make this a little, so here's the map. I don't want to talk about the map first. So I'm going to try to make this a little bigger, and you can tell me where, if you could start to see the data on the bottom. Can you see that data on the bottom?
Move it up, if
I
you
wonder
can
if I
move it up.
can.
Yeah.
Is that working?
That's good. Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if I could move it a little bit for me to the left. Will that work? Nope. Okay. All right. Very good. So now let me make this a little bigger for me. So I have you're enlarging and then the Zoom text enlarging. So I've got two methods in here. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is where this information comes from. So this information comes from the CDC and the census, who take, obviously large data surveys in the United States. And that's how we get our information. So we create a case, right? Obviously, VisionServeAlliance can't poll hundreds of thousands of people across the country and come up with information, come up with the status of their vision loss, right? And we do not have medical information sort of at our fingertips, where we can say, well, how many people hold these diagnoses and add them up, and how many people have acuity that leads to legal blindness. We don't have that information. We can't get it that way. So what we do is we go to the CDC, and the CDC and the census. CDC has something called the BRFSS, which is Behavioral Risk Factors Survey something. Science survey, something for the SS. And they, along with the census, ask a question to a huge portion of the population, not 250 million people like we have in the country, but something like 500,000. And this is the question. And you see it right on the bottom where it says Big Data Project National Report Insights. The first thing all the way on my screen on the left is, are you blind, or do you have serious difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses? So that's one of the questions in a variety of questions about people's health and education status and a whole bunch of other things that they're asked. So what we do is we extract all the people who said yes to that question, right? And start to cross-reference them with the answers to the other questions that are in the BRFSS, and then compare that to the people who said no to that question. Now, again, that's the case statement. So it's not perfect. right? Are you blind or do you have difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses? Does not say, what's your visual acuity? Do you have glaucoma or retinitis pigmentosa or Stargardt's disease or macular degeneration? We don't know the answers to those questions. I don't know their field of vision. I don't know their acuity. I just know that people self-reported that they are blind or have serious difficulty even when wearing glasses. That's the case statement. So that's what we're doing to make a determination of the numbers that we talk about. And I just want to walk us through. So roughly, it's actually a little bit more than this, but we're rounding up to keep a nice clean sheet here. Roughly about 4 million people statistically are determined to answer that question yes, right? They have a smaller sample size. They sample it up to the general population size. So we're talking about 4 million. The real number is about 4.7 million. 4.7 million people in the United States would fall into this category of people who are blind or have serious difficulty seeing even when they're wearing glasses. So if you remember the comedian from a long time ago, David Brenner used to say, "Who are these people?" So who are these people? That's what we want to know next. Who are they that they have these living with blindness? So we're going to ask some questions about their education levels, as you can see, and their income and their health conditions. So in general, here are all the folks, right? Women, African Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, right? People who are poor, right, and less educated. These are the things that are showing up that we're going to take a look at. Their social determinants of health. Do they have different health outcomes? All of this is available in the reports, which the national report you can get off the website, and state reports, depending on your state, may or may not be available to you on the website. I can answer more questions about that if it comes up. So I'm going to shift us just over a little bit to the next side there, where you see 4 million people ages 65 and older with vision impairment, right? So then we're doing some comparisons, right? Older people with vision impairment or older people without vision impairment, right? And if you remember days from math, greater than or less than, right? A greater than or less than signs here. So we just take a look at this just to see. So older folks who have vision loss, 28.7% of them did not achieve a high school diploma in the course of their lives, right? Versus 12% of people who don't report having vision loss, right? So if I have vision loss, I'm twice as likely, even more than twice as likely, to not have achieved my high school diploma, right? If I then start looking down at income comparisons, older people with vision loss, right? 10% of them earn, less than $10,000 a year, as opposed to 3.6%. So again, I'm much more likely to be in severe poverty if I have vision loss as an older person. And access to healthcare, right? Older people, 11.5% delay healthcare. They report they delay healthcare because of cost versus 4.2% if I don't have vision loss. So again, we just sort of look at these things together. I don't think these are a surprise, but now we actually have the data, right? The average person, we would say, is less educated, has less income, and has worse access to healthcare as it relates to their vision loss, right? So we can't say these are cause and effect. We just have a snapshot. People with significant vision loss are less educated, earn less money, and report delaying healthcare because of cost. So that becomes really significant with who we're dealing with, who we're training, who we're working with when we're working with seniors. So then we try to look at their chronic health conditions. So I'm going over a little bit to the right again on the screen there. So their chronic health conditions as it relates to people with vision loss, comparing them to people without vision loss. If you're getting a little profile, I work off 2 screens, so that's why I'm turning my head so much. So again, we simply just take comparison numbers. Older people with vision loss, 33.3% of them also report hearing loss when they get to that question on the BRFSS, as opposed to 15%. Okay, makes sense. Let's think of a disease like Usher syndrome, right? That's not unheard of that would happen. Again, 36% also answer positively to questions related to diabetes when they have vision loss, as 22% who don't. Again, this is very logical, right? Our diabetes, we know, causes diabetic retinopathy. So our vision starts to deteriorate, especially if it's type 2 diabetes with an older onset. We know this to be true. Heart disease is increased. We see 18% versus 10%, right? Depression, we're at twice as much. This is known. I question this just a little bit. I just question the word depression as a broad word. I always like to think of, is it major depression? Is it, an adjustment disorder with depressed mood, right? We have to think about those things a little bit. But what we do know just by looking at a number like this, which is a large number, is that when people lose their vision, things like social isolation occur, difficulty socializing occurs. There is a great sense of hopelessness. Again, we're 65 and older now, right? Great sense of hopelessness that sets in. So, people are struggling with that. So I think in the questioning that gets labeled as depression, okay, I'll accept that, but I want us, as we dig into these things, to just have a broader understanding. It may not be clinical depression or major episode that somebody can't get out of. And I think when I think of interactions with mobility instructors or vision rehabilitation therapists, I think that that's the first line of defense, where you're showing people that they can do things, and that fear and that adjustment, the adjustment disorder part of this, can be lifted simply by the things that we do on the ground, that people on this call listening to do on the ground. And as a
Jason,
rehab counselor, I can really attest to that anecdotally. Yes, please.
a question though, if these people were to receive types of even a vision exam, I mean, if they had the money and the access to healthcare from an optometrist, they could be wearing glasses and they wouldn't fall in this category.
Again, great thing. I'm gonna, if you could see me moving on my screen, I'm gonna go back right here. I think, Eileen, it's a wonderful question. I'm gonna go back to our case statement, right? Are you blind, or do you have difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses? Now, we don't know exactly how people interpret that question, right? So it is a good question. There's an assumption in this question that they have some kind of glasses that they're wearing. Now, did they go to the drugstore and get those glasses? Do they think glasses won't help me? So I answer yes anyway. We don't know. But your point in my mind, I'm shifting back over here. Your point in my mind is very, very well taken. A big part of what I try to do at VisionServeAlliance is continue to bring in our optometry partners into this type of work. I think there's been a divide. I don't want to over-exaggerate, but there isn't as much communication between the optometry field, the low vision optometry field, and the vision rehabilitation field as Jason would personally like there to be. Right? I'll really own it myself, Eileen, right? I don't, no community politics here. But I think your point is right. If people spend time with the optometrist, they may get a better measure of their refraction error, which could cause them to see better. Or if they're a low vision specialist, they may get exposed to a few techniques or devices that would help them see better, right? I've been to low vision specialists, right? I wear prism lenses, right? I'm holding up prism lenses. You usually don't get prism lenses unless you go to a low vision specialist, all right? I'm old school. I still have a monocular. You don't get a monocular unless you go to a low vision specialist, usually, or have access to some type of vision rehabilitation where it gets introduced to you by maybe another professional, or another professional helps train you to use it better. So I think the point is really well taken, Eileen, that could make a major difference in what people are experiencing. Does that make sense, right? Was that your line of thinking a little bit?
Yeah, I just, coming from myself, trying to get to an optometrist these days is especially when you're going through insurance type thing, and being on Medicare and
Yeah.
all the struggles that you go through when you're older because of the medical system. And I'm well educated and know the
Yes.
field, and yet I'm still can see myself
Yeah.
at being in this age group that it is hard to get a good correction.
Oh, it really is. I'll agree with you 100%. You know, a phrase I say all the time in some of the advocacy work that VSA does is, you know, eye care is healthcare, right?
Yeah,
Eye care
correct.
is healthcare, and I know the history, so I won't say I don't understand. Unfortunately, I understand all too well, unfortunately, why that statement still has to be made in 2024. We don't say pediatrics is healthcare, right? We don't say orthopedics is healthcare, right? That's a given. But for some reason, which I know and understand, we have some extraction from healthcare related to eye care, and that's reflected in this population in their limited access to eye care as Medicare recipients. There's no doubt about that. That's absolutely true. Medicare Advantage plans help a little with this, but not a lot. And the the challenges when eye care clearly becomes healthcare, like cataract surgery, can actually be greater sometimes with Medicare Advantage than with your traditional Part B. So now you're sort of choosing, do I get refraction error glasses? So therefore, I'm going to go to Medicare Advantage because that'll be paid for. Or do I get better cataract surgery and therefore I stay on Part B? Because some Medicare Advantage programs won't pay for laser surgery. They only want the surgery the old-fashioned way. It's very
And
complex.
the co-pays are so high
Hmm.
and going. And
Yeah,
and and it seems like everybody who reaches this age group is being diagnosed as having age-related macular degeneration
yeah.
or the beginnings of it. You know,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, among my peers, older peers, they're like, "Oh, went and I have age-related macular degeneration." I said, "Yes, it seems like everybody does."
Yeah, yep. And again, we have a medical component to that, like injections that can occur that your ophthalmologist will do
Right.
with your injections to help. But the other component of adjusting to the vision loss that comes from macular degeneration, wet or dry, age-related, is really significant, and the vision rehabilitation skills that come with that seem to fall outside of the system, and that's tough. I will make a plug. The American Macular Degeneration Foundation on their website has a wonderful series of videos about living with macular degeneration. It's really a good set of videos. I encourage people to watch it for professional reasons or personal reasons. Yeah, it's really terrific. You can just Google it. Um, they're members of VSA, and it is really terrific. So the last thing, let me talk about, and then I'm going to switch over, and I can talk forever, Eileen. So you got to give me the hook, the curtain. Like vaudeville. You got to give me the curtain. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. I hope you can still see that. On the bottom corner here, we're talking a little bit about just some health-related quality of life. And this is, this is really a big one, the first one. People with vision impairment are really at risk of falling, right? That's a huge risk. They're basically twice as likely, a little bit less, to fall. And we know from studying other senior healthcare issues that a serious fall for a senior really begins a process of complicated health issues, right? And this is a real chicken and an egg thing. Are the health issues there and then the seniors fall and the health issues are there? It's really significant. And I will tell you, having had a father who didn't realize he needed cataract surgery and took a real spill, he went to the ER after the spill. And again, anecdotal stories, but I hear this one all the time. And then it happened in my family. And nobody asked him if he had any trouble seeing, right? Nobody asked him at all. They asked him how he fell, where he fell, is he hurt? He got x-rays all over himself. But nobody asked him if he was having any trouble any difficulty seeing. So it's sort of fascinating to me. It would seem so logical that asking about sight would be the first question when a senior especially falls. What didn't you see? What did you trip on? So again, you could see these numbers here. Seniors with vision loss report at a much greater rate of having poorer health, right? They certainly report having more frequent physical distress. Frequent mental distress, right, is higher, and frequent limitations in activity, obviously higher. And we're really talking about things that the numbers are twice as much. They're really quite significant numbers. So I just like to point this out. This is what we've studied with this population. What I would say, we can talk a little bit about my thoughts about programming or interventions from the professionals that I perceive will be on this call or listen to this recording. But most of the things I suspect people already do in our fields with a good intake, with a good intake summary. But then to adjust things, right? I'm going to pick something random. You have a patient, a client that you might be working with significant, twice as great a chance of having heart disease. So you might want to just sort of check that out and then make a determination of how strenuous a mobility lesson might be, right? We talk a lot about mobility with stairs, and stairs can be really exhausting for a patient who has a heart condition. Now, again, I think a good intake captures all of this, but I think it's important to read that intake and to check and then to adjust programming as it relates to this. Again, if money is really tight, transportation and paying for it might be a real issue. And we certainly have more folks that we can guess are in the poverty level. And again, if education is an issue, then the sophistication of the instructions that somebody gives might be an issue. Or the needing greater assistance in accessing things that are more complicated. Sometimes it's really complicated depending on the local system to get paratransit, right? To get discounted on paratransit or to get certain services. I would say the same thing happens around the home, and it's just things for us to pay attention to related to programming. So I'm going to shift. Let me see if I can do this. Oops, it should be getting smaller, and I'm trying to get to the map. And now I'm hoping you can see the map and I can make that a little bigger. So Eileen, I'll ask you.
Okay.
Is that working? Can you
Yes.
see the map? Okay, great. So I just want to point out on the map here, this is, I mean, this map could give you a headache. This is a county by county sort of breakdown in the country. And we can see from the key on the bottom right of the map pane here, where we have greater severity of vision loss. So basically for Jason, who has real color issues with his vision loss, the darker spots are where it's worse, right? That's what I would say. And there are portions of this that really show. We can see some poverty pockets, but we can really see some areas, if you can see me moving the hand arrow, as we sort of swoop down in these areas, and just in general, not broadly, but in general, the southern part of our map is a lot darker than the northern part of our map over here. Now, we can also make some generalizations, and I know this well from being was studying this quite carefully. Let's say we go into a place that's a little lighter, like our northeast quadrant here, where I am right here, which is sort of like the Vermont-New York border right here. Being a former employee of New York State, I know that this is a very heavily Indian reservation population of New York State, right? Yeah. The same thing if I go to the Southwest and I'm here, I know that these are strong counties with Indian reservation population, which really has negative social determinants of health. But again, we can, as someone said to me, and I didn't interpret it this way, but when I was at AER, someone came over to me and said, Jason, this really is a political map. And unfortunately, it is in some ways because we can sort of see where different states choose to invest their money related to healthcare. That we can see. And that is related more in the northeastern quadrant of the country. It's just sort of a fact that shows up. It can be different, but we're talking about healthcare in this way and health professionals, and in some places it's just easier to access healthcare, for whatever reason it is. And in the places where it's easier to access healthcare, those are the places where our numbers look better and our map is a little bit lighter. Does that make sense? It's sort of like you could spend
It's
hours looking at this.
if you understand where the reservations are, it clearly indicates that it's reservation territories that are not has the greater number.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And that correlates directly with what we know about healthcare.
Yeah.
And again, I'll say it again, and I don't, again, this isn't like a statement like about who does what, nothing like that. But eye care is healthcare. That's, right? Because that's the beginning of our first step in to how we start to learn that we're having vision loss and what we can do about it. Not always, but really most of the time it's something's wrong with my vision. I'm going to go to the doctor and get glasses. And then it's like, oh, that doctor, the optometrist, said I can't get glasses. And he sent me to the specialist, right? That's usually the way it goes. I'm going to go get glasses because I think that'll help. So I go to whatever optometrist I have access to through my health insurance, or Four Eyes in the shopping mall, or Cone Fashion Optical or something like that. And that optometrist looks at me and says, oh, there's something more here. It's not a refraction error. And then they give me a referral to the specialist. The specialist is usually the ophthalmologist, who's a glaucoma specialist or a retina specialist. And then I start, right? And that's how I get into the system. So if I don't have access to that, you're exactly right, Eileen. It gets really, really tough. And we know
it's also cultural.
Mhm.
It's
Absolutely.
also among the Indians, the American Indians.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we were just talking about that when we looked at all those other numbers on the bottom of the screen. Education makes a difference, not always, but sometimes. Economic status makes a difference, not always, but sometimes. So these things all come into play. We're just trying to put some numbers on it so we can actually go out and say things and back it up. Does all that make sense?
Hi there, Jason.
Who am I talking to?
This is Stephanie Zabit.
Hi, Stephanie.
How are you doing? I don't know if I
well.
should turn my video on or not, but
whatever you're comfortable with is fine with me, Stephanie.
I'll go ahead and turn it on and see what happens. Okay. Hi, I work for an organization. I work for Guide Dogs for the Blind. And certainly because we do see clients from all over the United States and Canada, I really appreciate the correlation you're making to healthcare and such. So I would just add to your statement that eye care is healthcare, that hearing is healthcare too.
No doubt.
And just this percentage. We're really fortunate with my organization that we're offering free hearing screenings for our clients that are coming into our O&M immersion program. And I have to say that we have a very small sample size compared to what you have here, but I'm just going to approximate. It's about, I think, 60 people right now that we've been able to offer hearing screenings to. And of those, we found that 74% didn't know they have hearing loss, and they are learning they have some type of hearing loss when they come in. I said kind of a subjective thing with my boss, and I said, everybody's coming in with something. There hasn't been any like perfect like audiogram that has come through.
Yep.
And so when we think of hearing and the importance, how it relates to orientation and mobility, I think too, because a lot of our strategies involve hearing and
absolutely
utilizing that sound. that I wonder even if this percentage is low, because these are just people that think they have hearing loss or know they have hearing loss. And I think there's just so much more out there than we realize. And I think I too, relating to maybe this population, our seniors, how isolating that can be, right?
Yep.
And certainly when people go to an audiologist, they're being referred to, or like, okay, can you hear someone speak? And that's the only thing. But when it comes down to orientation and mobility, there's so much more that people need to hear to I think to have that independence and be able to independently travel that they can get from their environment. That I would love it. I tell the clients when they come in, they have their audiology screening, and it's like, I wish our healthcare system can think of it like going to the dentist. Like you go to the dentist every 6 months. It is a standard of healthcare. Why isn't hearing a standard of healthcare? So
I agree.
yeah,
You
I know. I don't think I need to beat
know.
that one down, because I could tell you probably agree with that. But I think
I
I
really
think
do. And
even our little population that we have is really showing how the hearing is a it's a big deal, and it's not being addressed at all.
you know, what it just brings forth is, again, and a long history as a voc rehab counselor for the state, right? Trying to access globally everything that people are experiencing to provide the best services through a state agency, right? And it did doing that in New York for a long time. I know it's long, and I know it's tedious, and I know it's a lot of information to gather. But a good intake is crucial. It's just crucial to know all the things that are going on with the client that's in front of you that you're going to start to work with. I can't emphasize it enough. And then if it's recorded well, again, forgive my, I don't know, my bias, or some of the negativity that I feel sometimes when we're all pressed for time. But reading that intake is important, right? Especially if it's if the way an organization is set up, where systemically it's done by somebody else. Reading it and understanding it is important, and engaging the client in conversation around it as it relates to the training that you're providing is also important. And you just give a wonderful example, right? But I think of another one. You're doing a lot with listening. You're also doing a lot with sensation, right? Especially with guide dog, with sensation in your feet, sensation in your hands, right? Sensation. And if neuropathy is present and severe, someone's not going to be able to, let's say, to feel the bumpy grit on the curb cut through their shoes, or a subway platform through their shoes, or even feel the changes in the pavement through their feet. So knowing these issues and adjusting for them is really important in all the work that we do. I just can't say it enough. It's very rare in the world that a client comes extraordinarily healthy in all aspects of their lives except having vision loss. That's a pretty rare client in what the vision rehabilitation system is now. That's a pretty rare client.
Hi, yes. Jason. It's Debbie Fitterer.
Oh, hi, Deb. I didn't know you were on this call. So nice to see you or hear you.
I saw you were presenting, and I said, I got to jump on. So I just wanted to add about the hearing loss and what Stephanie was saying. I work at the Helen Keller National Center, so everybody we work with has vision and hearing loss. And I was also taken aback by that statistic. And it's very interesting. I think, this is all self-reported, and I don't think necessarily that older people with visual impairment are really that much more likely to have hearing impairment. I think that maybe they are a little bit, but I think the real key is that people without visual impairment use their visual cues to augment their hearing so significantly that you don't even realize you're doing it. So when we're talking about a question like this, that's a self-report, they're compensating. And when you know, because heck, if we all live long enough, we're going to lose our hearing to a degree. But when you have your vision intact, you're really able to compensate in ways that I don't even think people realize. None of us realize how much the visual cues are augmenting your hearing. And we see that all the time. But it really does impact everything we do, especially with the orientation and mobility and tools related to vision rehab. So many of our tools have speech output or audio output that are not accessible to older adults with the additional hearing loss. So it's really something that we all have to keep in mind in terms of our service provision. But I just wanted to add that.
I'm so glad you did, Debbie. And I would say, you know, me knowing, so specifically the work that you've done, you know, knowing that anecdotally, I think is really fascinating and probably, you know, sort of an accurate statement. So hard to prove, but a real great insight, right? If people are unconsciously compensating for their hearing loss with their vision, then that starts to go away when their vision goes away, right? So all of a sudden they become aware in a very different way of that vision loss. I think that's a fascinating perspective. That's great. I'm so glad you mentioned it.
It also affects with the hearing loss, the social, emotional aspect.
Absolutely.
I mean, what I see among people who are experiencing a hearing loss is that they become so withdrawn, or they become really, communication becomes almost offensive because they can have to talk to control the conversation because they can't hear what the other person is saying. And it's sort of like they socially begin to have a lot of difficulty, whether they're seeing or not seeing, just with the hearing loss. Socially and emotionally, there's a real impact.
Yeah, again, you won't get it. You won't get an argument from me. I think some of that was why I was poking a little bit at the depression number. Not that people aren't feeling it and then self-reporting it, but to investigate it a little further, because I think when you get people out there a little bit, that starts to lift. And the way to get them out there a little bit is by so much of the skills that we're talking about. Yeah. So I want to spend a little time. I'm going to try to do this. Let's see if I can be successful here. I want to stop sharing and then share again with the working age one. So let me see if I can figure out how I'm supposed to do that. Give me a second. Everybody indulge. I don't know what they used to say on Saturday Night Live, talk amongst yourselves, right? Well, I find that I can't seem to find my stop sharing button, but I think I have to do this like this.
If you go down below, there's a share screen in Zoom.
But
and if you click on that and you stop sharing before you can share again.
Yeah, I have to. That's what okay, hold on. Sharing is stopped. Okay, great. So I did that. Now I couldn't find that, but I got it again. Share my screen. And I think we were there. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be this one and share. Let me hope that this is correct. Okay. This up bigger. Did I get out of 65?
Yes, you did.
I did. And so this one's going to say working age.
18 to 64.
Terrific. Okay. And that's blocked by my screen sharing note.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the bottom again, like I did. And Eileen, I'm going to ask you if I keep making it bigger. Is the bottom sort of still in view?
Yes, the bottom's in view. Keep making it bigger.
I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to. Oops.
No, wrong way. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I might have to make it a little smaller to see one number on my end in a minute, but I'll talk about that. Okay. So we're back to our younger population. So again, I'm on the bottom sort of left hand part of my screen at least. And we're talking about, are you blind or do you have seriously difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses? And now we're in our younger population. So this is our work status comparisons, and we're in the age 18 to 64. So when we're in 18 to 64, we're coming in that 8.7 million people said yes to that question, right? Again, statistically, that's what we come up with. We didn't poll 8.7 million people, right? We polled, in this study, it got polled about 500,000 people. So I just want to sort of do some quick math. If you add 8.7 million to in this age group, to the 4-point-something million in the other age group, we're really coming in at about 13 million people. And again, we're not counting kids. The number that they throw around a lot for the kids is about 2 million, but that's even harder to get and probably less accurate. I want to make a statement here as I'm saying, right, that there's probably 15 or 16 million people, you know, that are sort of blind or vision impaired in the country. I want to make a statement here. Depending on the way that we alter this question is really the way that the numbers will shift. So, right, if I take the word blind out of this question, the numbers shift dramatically, right? If we just say, do you have serious difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses? The numbers dramatically tick up with surveys where that question is. If we sort of take out, do you have difficulty seeing, period, the numbers really go up much larger. And in certain areas in the community, depending what people are advocating for, those very high numbers might be advantageous and certainly won't hurt us. And I'll give an example of that and then I'll get to this. You know, there's a lot of advocacy right now from some of our partners in the national field for really making websites much more accessible, and the audio transcription, you know, much more accessible, right? American Council for the Blind, American Foundation for the Blind, right? There's a lot of emphasis there. And the reality is, as we all know, is that websites that can become more accessible can help the population, right? Even if they're living with refraction error only. It's just nicer, right? Everybody likes large print when you research this, right? Or plenty of people who have to put on, you know, just the refraction error reading glasses to look at their phone. If the settings are adjustable more easily in that kind of technology, they simply don't have to do that, right? And it benefits folks. So sometimes people will use much larger numbers because what they're advocating for is different. And it's very valuable to say, you know, if you increase the contrast on your website, you know, something like that, or make that easier to do, or you increase the font size on your website, you know, 47 million people who struggle with vision loss will benefit from that, right? It's good to have a big number there, even though those folks may do fine just by having a refraction error correction. And I'll bring up your point, Eileen. If they don't have access, if they don't have access to the optometrist really easily or the ophthalmologist really easily, they'll just like it better anyway. They'll like a larger print menu, right? If the font is better and the contrast is better. It's just really common. So I just want to say, you know, we play around with these numbers. You'll see a lot of different numbers, and it's because the case statement is changing for those numbers. So that's what happens. Okay. Back to where we are with working age adults. So we're going to play around with similar things. Let's start with what's most controversial. So let's start there. There's this nice phrase that everyone likes to say, which says, you know, 70% of people with vision loss, blindness and vision loss, or blind folks, are unemployed, right? That's the statement that comes out. And we're going to poke around on that a little bit. First of all, that's a old number. It came from a report. I've investigated this now in this role for a while. And it actually didn't really say that, but unemployment is a funny word. So what we're going to play around with is who's in the workforce or not in the workforce. And then how come they're in the workforce or not in the workforce? What reasons are there for that? And then unemployment is a status that the Department of Labor uses to measure a person who's in or out of the workforce in a certain way. So that these numbers are very shifty. But we're very married to that number. I could understand that. Again, I know the history, so I could understand that. But we're going to poke at it a little bit, and this is sometimes where I'm the most controversial in my zealous speaking here. So talk about adults with vision loss and adults, like sort of in the general workforce, this population not there. So we can say, okay, adults with vision loss, we're talking about working adults in both cases. So 43.6% of adults are basically working in categories of being in the labor force or out of the labor force that identifies work and what that can be. And I can break that down. I don't have it all broken down because it's too detailed for this presentation, but we can talk about that versus sort of 70%, right? So yes, we're still much less in the workforce in some capacity than the general population without vision loss. But it's not accurate to say that 70% of people are unemployed. That wouldn't be an accurate statement. Really, we're talking about whatever this breaks down to. It's 57% of people, and I wouldn't use the word unemployed. I would simply say 57% of the people are not working at this time, and that is a radically different number than the 70. But I will say this, still not great. And if Jason had his way, we could pat ourselves on the back to say we're doing a little better, but we still have a long way to go. Because what I hear in conferences very frequently is we've been all working at this for 30, 40 years, and that number hasn't changed. And that number has changed, in my opinion, and based on this research. So I would say we deserve a little pat on the back. We've moved that needle, but we haven't moved it far enough. So we have out of work, right? And then unable to work. And this is really where I want us to focus our little bit of attention here, in unable to work, right? There's a question when we go through this in the BRFSS that asks that question, like, are you unable to work, right? And a much greater, it's like 4 times the amount of people with vision loss identify that they are unable to work than the population with sight. So that's really powerful. Let's take Debbie's point. These are self-reported things, right? Self-reported things. So let's take just a silly example. I work for the CDC. I get federal government funding from the CDC, and I work for the BRFSS, and I give somebody a call up, and I say, hey, I'm from the federal government, the CDC, doing our annual research here. We're just taking a survey. Are you currently working and employed, right? And do you want to work and be employed? I have a whole host of questions, and I'm thinking to myself, government employee is asking me these questions. I'm on Social Security at 29 years old, and the basis of my Social Security is that I'm unable to work. So I say, no, I'm unable to work because I'm afraid of what this phone call is, right? How do I know what's going on here? So I think this number could be elevated in some way just because of that reaction. Or people think, I was 19 and I was working, I don't know, make up something, Jason, as a lifeguard. And then I lost my vision and I can't work anymore. I'm unable to work because my chosen profession was a lifeguard or a truck driver or a train conductor or an airplane pilot or all these other things that, despite a tremendous amount of accommodation, that specific task would be a task that would be really, really hard to accommodate. So I just think it's really interesting to pay attention to that. So we could look through all these things. I'll read a little. Additionally, people ages 18-64 with vision percent, 8.1% are homemakers, 3.9% are students, and 5.1% are retired. So just some interesting numbers. These are our other statuses that the government uses to keep us to calculate out of the workforce, right? So again, a student isn't unemployed by government numbers, or a retired person isn't unemployed by government numbers. But they are people that are not in the workforce. And again, we see that we have a much higher percentage of people who are not in the workforce. Social determinants of health. So talk a little bit about that, education and things of that nature. Let me, I want to just go back up here so I can see that I know it's got a little smaller. I just want to make sure. Yeah. So the same things, because I lose it on my screen. The same things that we're talking about, more health, chronic health conditions and education levels as well. So we're going to go over to the next panel right here, education composition. So you should be able to see that. With vision impairment, without vision impairment, again, and we see the same thing reflected in our working age population, that we've got a greater percentage of people with vision impairment have not achieved a high school degree, a greater percent of vision and folks with vision impairment, 2%, right, have it, but not college, and then a greater percent of do not have college. Sorry, my phone is pinging a little bit. Just want to make sure we're okay. So we just see those levels there. Let me make this smaller. See if I can make it bigger where we all can see it, hopefully, because I moved my focal lens. Okay, so now we're talking income comparisons, where with our folks that are working, we're still earning less money than our folks, right? We have much more people who are in the workforce earning less money. 42% earning between 20 and 75,000 as opposed to 15%. And then 13% earning under 75,000 versus 40. So we're still doing that. What I think some of this shows is we have a lot of tenacity and grit. For those of us who people living with vision loss who do go to work, they earn less. And remember what we said, we have a higher incidence of these complicated health issues or secondary disabilities. So those people are part of this number as well in the workforce. So we're sort of sicker or more disabled and working for less, but yet staying in the workforce. I think there's really something to be said for the grit that shows itself in the population that we have. Okay, I'm going to come over here and then I'm going to try to make this a little bigger. Can I slide this over? Okay, so chronic health issues, I'm on that portion. So again, higher numbers, go back to Debbie's point, with hearing loss, higher numbers with diabetes, higher numbers with depression, higher numbers with kidney disease, and higher numbers with stroke. All of those folks there. So again, I just want to reflect on this a little bit in summary. There's similar patterns between working age and adult over 65 plus, sorry. So there's similar patterns that we have there in the research that came up as far as the health, economic status, and education status. But in my interpretation from the data, and what this data suggests, we are more in the workforce than we anticipated, and we are more working harder, sort of, and earning a little bit less. So that would be my interpretation of this. Hopefully, this generates some thoughts, some questions and ideas, and I can go over one other sheet with us if we want, but it would basically be the same data. I'll say the same thing about sort of how to adjust programming. I think that program adjustment would be the same, you know, where you'd consider all these things, the value of a good intake. But in some of these things, you know, the career aspiration discussions can occur here. How people get in jobs and get stuck in jobs. Difficulty with career advancement. You know, perhaps reflected in these numbers. Again, we don't have a deep dive on that. It's just a bit of my anecdotal experience and what I draw out of these numbers. And how hard it is for some of our folks to go to work, and the fact that they go to work anyway. When you look at the national report on this and all the tables, that's pretty apparent, that people who are multiply disabled, who are in the workforce with vision loss, really, really work hard and really work despite things that I think would stop some other people from working. It's pretty amazing. So does that help? Are there questions related to this? This report is much more complicated. So that also means that not being a statistician, there's much more opportunity for me to make a false claim just out of out of ignorance. So if I said something that doesn't resonate, please share, or just give me any thoughts anyone has.
In the relationship of their salary to working, they probably have jobs in those agencies. They're like nonprofits that underpay all the time. I mean, including probably a lot of your member organizations who the salaries are not the greatest when you are working for a nonprofit, or they're working in, fortunately, we're working a better hour rate, but they're working in for hourly wages. So I can see where they would be not earning as much as the other populations because of where they go to get their jobs.
So there's so much there, right? There's so much in what you just said. So I'll point out a couple of things.
Okay.
Again, and some of this is anecdotal. I wish I had time to just sort of look at all of this that way. One is very fortunately, in the past several years, right, we don't have sub-minimum wage in the blindness community anymore, right, at all. So thank goodness for that. All of the agencies are at least minimum wage agencies with benefits that match the private sector. So that's really positive, and I just feel compelled to point that out. But one thing that, Eileen, that you really do identify, which is very true, is two things that are sort of subtext of that. One is that many people who work in those in places you're identifying might still collect Social Security, especially if they're getting Social Security disability payments, right? Because the threshold there is very high, not very high, but the threshold there is a good threshold of money that you're allowed to earn before Social Security starts docking your payments. So the system there kind of facilitates that. And we were talking about healthcare. So whether or not agencies provide healthcare, whether or not that healthcare is as good as Medicare, and the fear of getting off Medicare, and then even if you get on private insurance, but then losing a job and then losing the private insurance, the act of getting back on Medicare and Social Security disability is huge. The last thing I'll say about that is there's also sort of a fiscal cliff here, which means if I'm in a regular structure and I'm not on Social Security, and I get a raise, like I make, say, minimum wage, it's, of course, our national minimum wage is still very low, but most states' minimum wages now, not most, a good amount of states' minimum wages are hovering around $15 an hour. So I'm going to pick that. So I'm going to say, let's say I make $15 an hour and I work 20 hours a week. So that's what I make. And I do that to keep my Social Security benefit at the level that I need it to be. My boss may simply want to just give me a raise. He may say, or she may say, hey, let's give you $17 an hour raise. You're doing a great job. But I may not be able to take that raise because that raise will draw me over a line in Social Security where even though I'll make $40 more a week, right, I'll lose more of that money on my Social Security side. Or if they wish to increase my hours, I'll lose that money on Social Security side. So that becomes a very difficult scenario, which I believe keeps some of our folks fairly impoverished. So just a little nuance on that, because I think it's important, because I don't want people to think, that there are vision impaired folks who are still being paid by the mop that they make, right? And if I make 100 mops, I make this much money. And if I make 40 mops, I make that much money. That no longer exists in our system. But it did. And it's a pretty shameful part of our past, I will say. I'm very glad it's behind us. Did I get a little too much politics there? I did all right.
No. Sometimes we forget about the history and how much progress we've made.
Yeah. I enlarged the map a little bit on the screen, just because it's very similar. It's very similar. It's actually a little darker in some of these areas here, if you did a side-by-side comparison. And I think that again has to do with when we're older, we do get a little bit more out of Medicare and some of our health coverage than when we're not. It's easier to get into that system that way than through disability at a younger age. So I think that makes this map a little bit darker in these states. Also in these states up here, again, there's a little bit of politics here, as was pointed out to me. Our ability to get a reasonably priced insurance through the Affordable Care Act is a little bit stronger. Again, I'm just stating fact. If you have a state that doesn't subsidize the Affordable Care Act or accept that state, you're in a place where it's a little bit harder to get health insurance. And when you don't have health insurance, eye care is health care. Yeah. And your possibility of losing more vision based on glaucoma at 40 is definitely greater, unfortunately.
And yet it's attractive to be in warmer weather when you're elderly.
Yeah, it's also, yes, and people are attracted by the state tax base as well. And some of that comes into play here. So I'll stop sharing and I'm going to open us up for conversation. A few more people had joined. So now I could see everyone's name nice and easy. Any other thoughts or ideas?
Within VisionServeAlliance, are the agencies looking at, I mean, I know that you discussed a little bit about the clients who come in for service and doing that intake. But what about the people who don't even go to seek services? Is there outreach happening by those agencies to find those people?
So again, I'm going to play with a whole bunch of statistics here that are, depending on the case statement, Eileen, right, of what I'm going to say. So there's a popular number that comes out, especially for seniors, that says only 5% of seniors who could benefit from vision rehabilitation services actually get them, right? That's a popular stat that's put out. I know where that stat comes from. Okay, I understand where it comes from. I think we're a little higher than that. I think a little bit more seniors are getting access to vision rehabilitation services than 5%, because how we measure them and what is vision rehabilitation becomes a question. So, but having said that, I am very confident that a number like 80% is extraordinarily accurate, right? That 80% of people who would benefit from vision rehabilitation services who are seniors do not get them. I think that number is a little bit better when we get between 18 and 64, especially with working age folks. And that number actually gets even better when we're talking about kids, right? Because kids at least have could be flawed, but they have a stronger, robust system as they get into the school system, right? As you get into that school system, if a teacher notices something's going to happen, it might happen slow, it might not be what you need, you might have to fight for it, all that's true, but something's going to happen there, as opposed to if you're 30 and you're just sort of sitting on the couch at home and you don't go out and you don't, right? No one's going to interact with you to move you into that system. Okay, so that's not even an answer to your question yet. It's just a baseline. The answer to your question is agencies work really hard to try and bring more people into their systems. So that's absolutely true. I would say every one of our agencies constantly recruits to bring more people in and to continue to educate the public. We educate the public broadly on their behalf. But then, unfortunately, we bump into our milestones. Not our milestones, our roadblocks, right? We bump into roadblocks on these things with how the service is getting paid for, where people actually get access to the service, and then can the service be provided because of the shortage of vision rehabilitation professionals, which is really severe. So yes, we do try hard to bring people in and get them service, but we bump into those roadblocks when that happens, right? I have agencies that'll say to me, I don't have enough people to provide the services, so therefore I have a wait list because I can't hire, because I just don't have enough people base to hire from. That's very common. Or they'll say, I can provide the services, but I simply don't have enough money. I don't get enough reimbursement from the reimbursement sources, and I can't fundraise enough to get people the services that they need. So there becomes a gap there. You know, there's just places where the roadblocks exist. But yeah, we work real hard at it, Eileen. I love the question, and VisionServe is on it. It's a huge part of what I do to try and increase in all levels the amount of vision rehabilitation services that's available to the public that is blind and low vision.
Hey, Jason, it's Debbie again.
Hi, Deb.
So my question is, this study is talking about 65 and up for the older adults, and our older blind programs are 55 and up. So
Yep.
the numbers don't really correlate, you know, in terms of advocacy for more funding and things like that. Like, you can't use these numbers in particular to address that. So that's just, I know that, you know, that you had no control for that, but it's just a little variable that
Yeah, right. You know, we know each other well, so right on, Debbie. I mean, you're absolutely right. Again, it really actually speaks to the divide. It's a good question, right? 55 and older is an RSA number, and an RSA is housed out of the Department of Education, and 65 and older is a CDC number, CDC funded by healthcare. So it's actually a pretty interesting and stark example of that divide that we live in about vision rehabilitation services being which, right? Being an educational services that gets provided from what in the old days we called vision rehabilitation teachers, right? Or in the healthcare system. It's a stark example of that, right in the thing you noticed. I agree. Hopefully the programs are doing okay in New York. You can tell me that they're okay, or don't say anything. I'll just live in hope.
we're okay. We're okay.
Well, I think it takes a lot of courage to grow old, that's for sure.
Yeah, I will say, you know, I could talk about this forever. I will say that I really do believe the field is making progress in all these areas, and I'm really, you know, I was joking before. People know this who might know me. I did a lot of work in the state of New York prior, and then started to shift to national focus when I worked with Reader's Digest Partners for Sight, and now at VisionServeAlliance. And I really do see some progress. We still have a long way to go, but I see some progress, and I'm encouraged by where people are, and you know, and how we're working together to move these things forward. I really am. I think that it's getting better for people living with vision loss in so many ways. And we've made real progress, let's say, in the past 50 years through legislative things, and just general changes to public perceptions of disability and vision loss, and people's abilities. I really see very, very positive change there, but it's slow. I wish it was much faster, but it's slow, but I see it.
Well, I thank you very much. This is really interesting, and it really needs to be known about what is happening with our elderly population. And I think we've emphasized or have looked at the rehab and the working population, but the elderly blind I think are really underserved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the numbers are worse there. And I'll make give me a moment before we stop. I'll simply make a little bit of a plug. VisionServe has really tried to bring the community together on some of these topics. And last year we had a conference which we called the Open Space Conference. And open space meant that we had a whole large exercise where people got to select, conference attendees got to select the issues that were really important to them in the community, and then talk about them. And as a result, with the exception of AI in vision rehabilitation, because that's very popular with many other national organizations, we took the highest rated issues that came up in the conference, and we created our second conference around those issues, where people can spend a lot of time exploring them if they want. And one of those issues, there's a few of them, I'll name a few, but one is transportation. VSA is doing a transportation webinar next month. It's open to the entire public. So people can check our website and see when that comes, read our e-news and see when that comes. But we'll do some real work on transportation at our conference. And actually our conference will be in Scottsdale, and Waymo, the car company, the driverless car company, is in Scottsdale, and they'll be doing some demonstrations for us, and we'll have the opportunity to see how Waymo is really helping blind and vision impaired folks travel as independently as possible. You know, Waymo, you know, if there's no driver in the car, they can't throw you out for using a guide dog, right? So Waymo's really been helping a lot of our population. So the transportation issues we'll talk about, education issues we'll talk about, using research and data collection in vision rehabilitation was one of the issues that we'll talk about. Senior issues is another issue that we'll talk about. And then lifestyle issues in general, all those things that aren't vision rehabilitation, like athletics and reading and music. Try to talk about how to bring those in, so the life a little bit more broad and a little bit more reflective of the general population, and all the things that they do, athletics, you know, like that, arts. So all these topics will be up for discussion, and we really encourage folks to come. So if this type of conversation is interesting, and that's when I see all these things happening, I think we really are making some kind of progress. There's really great things out there in the world. It's still a challenge to get them. That's the hardest part. Access is hard, but once you gain access, it's there. So a little
And
plug
what
for
are the
VSA.
dates for that?
Oh, great. Thank you. They are the April 29th to May 1st. And it's all over our website. It'll be in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's open to anybody who has any interest. I think it'll really be an excellent conference. It's a beautiful location, by the way, just as an aside. It's right outside of downtown Scottsdale. And we've got a really great, what I want to say, what do we call it? Like an offsite dinner that's going to happen at something called the Musical Instruments Museum, which is this just incredible place. It's just I went out there to scout it. It's just an incredible place. And we'll be able to have some auditory exhibits for all to be able to participate in. So, you know, anyone's interested, and if anyone's interested in any of this, I really encourage everyone to reach out. And I think I'm just realizing, Eileen, I should probably, if people don't have it, I can give out the materials that we looked at today. That's a public one sheet, so that can come out. I can send that out to everybody on the call. I'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate your time, and the data is most interesting, and it probably will have an impact on all of us as we grow older.
Terrific.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
So much,
well, thanks,
Jason.
everybody. It's really a pleasure.
Okay, just an announcement that tomorrow night OMSA is having its town hall meeting, and this is sort of our annual membership meeting where we share with you all the progress and all the reports from all the committees and all the work that we have done during the past year. So if I know that most of the people on the call are members of OMSA. We look forward to sharing that with you tomorrow evening. It'll be at 7 o'clock, also Eastern time. So thanks. Okay. Have a great evening.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
Okay.
asking me to talk. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks a whole lot, Jason. Appreciate it.